Just a couple weeks before school starts, the government of Saskatchewan is making some changes in classrooms. The education minister announced the new rules yesterday. Dustin Duncan says if students younger than 16 want to be called by a different first name or pronoun, schools will need to get their parents' permission first. And parents will also be able to have their kids opt out of sex education, which will no longer be offered by third parties like Planned Parenthood. For more, we've reached the education minister. Dustin Duncan joins us now on the line. Good morning, Minister.
Good morning, Stephanie. Thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for making time for us. Why were these changes necessary?
Well, we've heard from parents who want to be more involved in their children's education, especially around issues that I think everyone can acknowledge that are sensitive or in some cases controversial for some people. And so this is a move to ensure that we have province-wide alignment in terms of how parents are informed when and how sex ed is being taught, what resources are being used. In that case, 15 out of 27 school divisions already have a policy like this. So the majority of school divisions already have a policy that does allow parents to know what's being taught, when it's being taught, to various extents in terms of what those policies actually look like. Most school divisions actually have a policy that speak broadly to engaging parents when it comes to sensitive or controversial issues or those that may be deemed controversial. Although in some cases, outside of those 15 school divisions aren't always clear in terms of who the onus is on. Is it on the school? Is it on the parents to engage with the school? Is it on the school to notify the parents? But in that case, this is just making it consistent with what already 15 school divisions have in place.
When you say you heard from parents, which parents?
Well, parents from all across the province, frankly. Certainly this came up, I would say before the issue in Lumsden, but certainly after the issue in Lumsden, where I think parents, were getting a sense that they were maybe not involved to the same extent that they would like to be in some of these, again, sensitive issues involving their children. And so I think this has been growing, and the issue in Lumsden really just, I think, was the issue that really made this right out into the open.
When you say sensitive or controversial issues, what do you mean?
I think just issues around sexual health education. I think issues around a growing move by not just school divisions in Saskatchewan, but across Canada when it comes to issues around when a child expresses a desire to change their name or their gender, whether or not parents are involved in that discussion. And so, I think this has been coming for some time.
What about kids who don't feel safe telling their parents about that?
Sure. So in that case, there is a provision to say that the school division will be directed to provide supports to that student to, first and foremost, get an understanding of why that is, why that child expresses a concern that this may be a problem in their home if they were to share that information. So we need to understand why. Certainly, you and I, we were all once 13 years old. The perception and the reality sometimes isn't always the same, especially when we're dealing with children that don't have the same life experience as adults, that don't, their brains are still forming. They're dealing with impulse control. They are, in some cases already going through puberty. And so these are very complex issues. And so there will be a provision to say, in that case where a child expresses that there may be a danger in their parents knowing this information, that we need to wrap around support around that child to get them to a place where if this is what they feel and this is what they desire in terms of how they want to proceed, we need to get them to a place where they are comfortable in telling their parents.
How do you do that?
Well, again, these are very complex issues, but again, let's keep in mind that, we still, for the most part, have very small school communities. And so if a child is deciding that they want to change their name and their gender in schools, well, there, in some cases, have been policies to say that if they don't want their parents to know, that the teachers wouldn't be able to share that information with the parents. That's not to say that that policy applies to everyone else around that child. So the other students are going to know. Other people in that school community are going to know. And so I think that this policy that has been in place, again, in some school divisions, but I think that number potentially would be growing over the next number of years. Frankly, I think that puts the teacher in a very difficult spot as well. So we're going to work with school divisions as we roll out this policy and develop what those supports are going to look like to enable that child to feel comfortable with the decision that they want to make, to the point where they can tell the people that, frankly, are the most important people in their lives.
Will this change affect all kids and their names? If Nicholas prefers Nick or Robert prefers Bobby, will the school need to check with parents on that?
Again, I think that, what we're talking about is when children are looking to change their name associated with a change in their gender. I think that it is, obviously, if a child prefers to go by a shortened version of what their given name is, I think that that's different than what this policy is speaking to.
How does this make trans kids safer?
The first thing I would say to that is that I think and it's a good question, but I think that question, the assumption in that is that the policy that is being put in place before yesterday's announcement, that in and of itself makes kids, including trans kids, safer. And I don't think we actually know that. So what we want to be able to be assured of, as much as possible, knowing that every situation is going to be different, is that parents are involved in what, for many kids, this will be, to that point in their life, the biggest decision that they are trying to make in their lives. And so the view of the government is that parents need to be more involved, not less involved. And so we are going to work with school divisions to ensure that kids are safe and that they have the supports that they need.
There's been a lot of study done, including a big one at the University of Texas, Austin in 2018, which shows that when transgender young people are allowed to use their chosen name and pronoun, their risk of depression and suicide drops. What do you make of that?
Well, I haven't seen that study. I think that what we do know is that in the school setting, children do best academically, socially, when their families are involved in their lives. I think that that's pretty clear. We want to ensure that parents look. As a society, we put guardrails when it comes to adults making decisions for children. So parents already need to consent in school divisions when it comes to a child wanting to go on a field trip, a child being dispensed medication. When there's an intervention plan developed for that child, the parents have to consent to that. We put other guardrails on to say that kids shouldn't be consuming alcohol, consuming tobacco, using a tanning bed. We say that we put up guardrails.
Is it risky behavior to talk to a teacher about your sexuality or your gender?
But I think the assumption from some is that it would be a risky behavior if parents know about this. And I don't think the default position should be that for parents that agree with what the government has announced yesterday, that they're putting their children at risk. Because I disagree with that.
Well, why do you think a child might not tell their parents?
I think every situation is going to be different. But I know as a child, when I was a child, the things that I thought were real were maybe my perception. And so I don't think we ought to just discount parents' involvement because a child may think that let's find out if there is actually a risk. Because those provisions already exist. For whatever reason, if a child is at risk because of their parents, there are ways for the state to intervene. But I don't think that we should have the assumption that because parents agree with the decision that the government makes, they are automatically a risk to their children. I think that that's a very dangerous road for people that have already seen some reaction to this announcement that some people are already walking down. And I think that it's unfortunate.
There were similar changes made in New Brunswick, and the children's advocate there reviewed them and found them to violate students' human rights and charter rights. And Saskatchewan's children's advocate is, she says, deeply troubled by the effect this policy will have on the rights of children. Why didn't you talk to her before you came up with this?
Well, at the end of the day, the government's responsible for initiating policy. There are independent officers, including the child advocate, that have their authority to look at policy and provide recommendations to the government. I hope that the child advocate would look at the policy and the reasons why we are putting in place these policies with an open mind. We will certainly work with the Child Advocate Office as we look to roll this policy out in Saskatchewan through our school divisions. But again, there are reasons why we as adults put in place guardrails when it comes to children. And I think that this is an appropriate measure, and we will work very closely with school divisions so that we put in place policies that are in the best interest of all, including children.
What else are you considering when it comes to the involvement of parents in education? Will schools need to ask permission from parents for kids to join GSAs?
No, I'm not looking at additional policies at this point. This is for some school divisions, this will be a significant change, and so we will be working with school divisions on that. But again, in terms of parents knowing when and what and how sex ed is being taught, that's already the case in 15 out of 27 school divisions. So this is making that consistent across the province. Some school divisions had policies or were in the midst of developing policies with respect to the other issue of children wanting to change their name and their gender. So we will be working through that. So that's where my focus is right now.
Why wouldn't this extend to requiring schools to disclose that a child wants to join a gay-straight alliance?
Well, as I said, we're working through these policy changes right now. These will be significant changes for a number of school divisions. We want to bring that in alignment over the coming months. I think, as I've already noted, there are already a lot of points in the school system that parents need to consent for their children to take part. But in terms of other areas such as being a part of a GSA, I'm not contemplating that change at this point.
What will be the repercussion for schools and teachers if parents complain that these new policies aren't followed?
Well, I can't say that today. At the end of the day, the Act gives me the authority to issue these directives of this nature, and it would be my expectation that school divisions would abide by those and work with us to implement them in a way that obviously protects children, but also allows for the proper amount of engagement of parents in the school system.
What do you say to those who are worried this makes the most vulnerable kids in our society less safe?
I think that assumes that the policies that were already in place made them more safe, and I don't think that is the case. I don't know how we can say.
Well, there is research that shows that depression and suicide, which is extremely high in trans kids, drops when they're in a place that allows them to go by the name and the pronoun they prefer.
And I think we have to look at every policy.
You've not read any study that shows that? There's many experts who say that this is a huge part of a trans kid's mental health, to be in a space where they are referred to in the manner of their choosing. You've not read anything that suggests that to you?
Well, I haven't read that specific study, but
there's more than one. This was just the biggest one.
But I would say that what we need to do is balance that protection for students, which we want all schools to be a safe place for students, but also the ability for parents to look. I'm the parent of 3 kids. We have great teachers, and we love our teachers. But I and their mother are the most important people in their lives. And so when we are talking about, we're not talking about just smaller version of adults. We're talking about children. And it is my view that parents should be more involved, not less involved. And I think
If one of your children told you they were trans, what would you say?
I would love them.
And you'd sign that consent form to let them go by the name and pronoun of their choosing?
Well, we would certainly have a conversation as a family and discuss it as a family, which I think is what should happen. But policies that are put in place where that isn't always the case, I don't think that is. I just don't know how that's appropriate. That we're going to leave the most important people in a kid's life out of what is to that child probably the most significant thing that they're going through.
You know that some parents kick their kids out when they find out they're gay or trans.
And so we need to make sure that we're providing the support. I don't think the default position shouldn't be, how do we keep this from the parents? The default position needs to be, how do we provide support for that child and frankly for that family so that that child can get to a point where they can tell the people that they are closest to what they are, what they're going through. The most important thing that they're going through in that part of their life. But the default position, I don't know how it can be. How do we keep this from the parents?
I thought it was, what does the child want? What's best for the child, I thought was the default position, not how do we hide this from parents?
But again, we put guardrails up in society to protect children. And so this is an area where we just believe as a government that parents should be involved more and to a greater extent, not to a lesser extent.
Thanks for your time this morning, Minister.
Thanks, Stephanie.